The coronavirus, a PR disaster for China, or a propaganda victory? Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. You know, I criticize the Chinese Communist Party a lot. But as many commenters have pointed out to me, it's also important for me to praise the party when they do things well. So I will. The Chinese Communist Party is really, really good at turning their terrible mistakes into propaganda wins and convincing the rest of the world to agree. They're doing it right now with the coronavirus, and they've done it before too. For example, after Mao Zedong took over in 1949 and enforced collective farming, the Chinese Communist Party plunged the nation into poverty and starvation. Then, Deng Xiaoping made free market reforms, and Chinese people were able to make a living again. But the Chinese Communist Party spun it as if they lifted people out of poverty, even though it was actually Chinese people themselves who worked their way out of poverty once the party backed off a bit with those communist economic policies. Here's how Chinese state-run media covers it. China lifted millions of people out of poverty. The Communist Party has gotten respected global institutions like the World Bank to carry that same line. Then Chinese state-run media repeat their propaganda, this time citing the World Bank to make it sound legit. Then Western media pick up the story too, because the World Bank said it. So all the credit for lifting people out of poverty goes to China, i.e. the Chinese Communist Party. And nowhere does that article mention how the Chinese Communist Party put all those people in poverty in the first place. It's like you throw someone overboard, watch them struggle to swim, and then eventually you throw them a rope and watch them claw their way back to the boat. And now you're the hero for saving them. The Chinese Communist Party has repeated the same playbook over and over, like with faking GDP growth and covering up their shady organ transplant business, or how they're putting Uyghurs in concentration camps. And now we're seeing that same propaganda machine at work with the deadly coronavirus disease. It's only been a few months, and the virus is spreading globally. And we're seeing headlines like this in Western media. The first signs are emerging that China's coronavirus containment could be working. And can China's COVID-19 strategy work elsewhere? Yes, says the Wall Street Journal. Drastic measures similar to those deployed by China and imposed in parts of Italy to contain the epidemic are now overdue elsewhere. So let's back up and look at how the Communist Party went from massively screwing up the initial response to the outbreak to convincing the world that they did everything right all along. Starting with Step 1, a massive cover-up. As of now, the first case of the coronavirus disease, COVID-19, can be traced back to November 17, 2019. By the final day of 2019, the number of confirmed cases had risen to 266. But the Chinese Communist Party responded not by implementing health measures, but by covering up what was happening. They detained people who talked about it online. They arrested the first doctors who reported on it. As an important political meeting took place in Wuhan, officials spent 2 weeks saying there were no new cases of infection, no firm evidence of human transmission, and no infection of medical workers. Those were all lies. In fact, the coronavirus was already spreading outside China. By mid-January, there were so many cases that the Chinese Communist Party realized they couldn't continue to cover it up. It was time for Step 2, a declaration of war. What cover-up? We're fighting a war against the coronavirus. Communist Party leader Xi Jinping came out and said China will resolutely curb the outbreak of the virus. That's right about when the number of reported cases of coronavirus tripled. The coronavirus wasn't actually spreading faster, it just got politically riskier for local officials to cover it up. especially after central authorities announced that lower-ranking officials who covered up the spread of the virus would be nailed on the pillar of shame for eternity. Then the Communist Party pivoted to step 3, ruthless authoritarianism. By the end of January, China was reporting almost 12,000 cases of infection and 259 deaths, and those were just the official statistics, so the real numbers were probably much higher. Authorities put an entire province of 58 million people under lockdown and restricted the movements of more than half the country in one way or another. On the ground, local authorities rounded up infected people and put them into mass quarantine centers, even though the conditions were not the most sanitary. When people were caught outside without face masks, police savagely beat them again and again. Or in some cases, authorities even welded sick people into their apartments. And they made sure to censor negative news about the coronavirus outbreak, including disappearing citizen journalists into indefinite quarantines. Did it work? Well, I'll tell you what didn't work. The people of China. They were told not to go back to work, and China's manufacturing hit a record low. But soon, the Chinese Communist Party saw this as a huge problem because their political legitimacy is based on delivering continuous economic growth. Clearly, it was time for step 4, announcing they've won. The Communist Party has no choice politically but to get people to go back to work and revive the economy. So that's what they've told people to do now. First, state-run media started pushing the narrative that the number of coronavirus infections was on the decline. They started doing this back in mid-February, even though at the time they were A, talking only about areas outside the main epicenter of Hubei province, and B, being misleading. The total number of infections was not actually declining. There were still new infections every day, but the number of new infections per day was declining. They're saying it had gone from this to this, so it's still going up. But forget about that. The Chinese Communist Party leaders wanted you to believe the coronavirus was on the decline in China, and that they controlled it in only 3 weeks. But here's the rub. Communist Party leaders didn't actually believe it themselves. If they did, they wouldn't have canceled their own hugely important political meeting in March. So yes, Chinese leaders were putting a good face on things. And that's why, while they were implementing ruthless authoritarianism and announcing they'd won, they were also, step 5, co-opting respected global institutions. Institutions like the World Health Organization, or WHO. This report on the coronavirus comes from a joint mission between the WHO and the Chinese government. It says China has rolled out perhaps the most ambitious, agile, and aggressive disease containment effort in history. In fact, the leader of the joint mission said hundreds of thousands of people in China did not get COVID-19 because of this aggressive response. Don't worry, he's basing that on data given to the WHO by Chinese scientists. And here's what the head of the World Health Organization had to say.
Almost all member states were praising China for what it did. China took action massively at the epicenter, at the source of the outbreak.
Here's another WHO official.
If I had COVID-19, I want to be treated in China.
If you're wondering how on earth the WHO would be willing to lavish such praise on the Chinese Communist Party, even though this is happening on the ground, I suggest you go back and watch my episode from February 22nd called Coronavirus, How WHO Corruption Helped It Spread. Suffice it to say, when respected global institutions take Chinese money, sometimes it colors their vision and impairs their hearing. And after co-opting the WHO, the Chinese Communist Party has been, step 6, repeating the praise in state-run media. Oh look, the WHO head praises China's efforts to curb the coronavirus. Even the head of the United Nations has praised China's efforts. Here's a video released by state-run CGTN showing how the Communist Party has done such a good job fighting the coronavirus that now they're sending a team of Chinese experts to help in Italy.
China has sent a special medical team to Italy to assist with control efforts there. It comes after China's foreign minister told his Italian counterpart that Beijing stood ready to help.
And after pushing that message through English-language state-run media, the stage is set for Step 7, getting Western media to praise China. Now that the Chinese Communist Party has claimed it's won against the coronavirus and co-opted global institutions to agree and pushed that message aggressively in its own state-run media, it seems Western media are willing to pick up the narrative. Here's a video from South China Morning Post. A 7-member team was sent to Italy, the worst hit country after China. That footage looks familiar. Here's an article from the Associated Press. WHO chief praises China's virus fight, urges more from world. That article does not mention the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up or its ruthless authoritarianism. And the Associated Press is a newswire service, so that article got picked up by potentially hundreds of other Western media. And here's a report from Reuters, another newswire service.
It's a sign Chinese efforts to contain coronavirus are working. President Xi Jinping visited its epicenter, Wuhan, on Tuesday, for the first time since the outbreak began. His arrival in the city where coronavirus is understood to have taken hold late last year could suggest China is about to declare victory in the battle. Xi visiting those who are on the front line, health workers, soldiers, police and volunteers.
Now what you should do is hold a strong faith. We should all strengthen our confidence together. We will win this battle.
Wow, thanks Reuters for creating a story entirely based on Chinese state media footage and then pushing that prepackaged video out to the thousands of Western TV channels that subscribe to your newsfeed. And also, thanks for not questioning any of it, including how when the video cuts to show Xi Jinping talking to the guy in the hospital, he's actually not talking directly to the guy. It's through a TV screen 9 feet away, as if the coronavirus could get through the TV screen. And here's a reporter from the New York Times interviewed on MSNBC.
China has had enormous success in beating down its epidemic.
He goes on for a full 5 minutes about how great China's approach is. He makes the Chinese medical system look really competent, when that's just not the reality most people on the ground have been facing. Although in a way, he's right.
China has had enormous success in beating down its epidemic.
Clearly, a lot of Western media organizations are not as skeptical as they should be when it comes to the Chinese government's propaganda. Which means now we're going to see Step 8. China saves us all. The natural extension of this is that since the Chinese Communist Party has done such a great job beating the coronavirus, oh, sorry, wrong clip.
If I had COVID-19, I want to be treated in China.
Thank you. Now it's time to learn from China. If only we could implement the same great system here in the West. Western media, take it away. Can China's COVID-19 strategy work elsewhere? Drastic measures similar to those deployed by China to contain the epidemic are now overdue elsewhere. Yes, but could you put it even more clearly? China saves its people as democracies slaughter theirs. And it's not just the idea that China's repressive, authoritarian, communist system has done a great job at containing the coronavirus inside China. It's also the idea that China's repressive, authoritarian, communist system has saved the rest of the world. Back in February, Chinese state-run media started rolling out the idea that China was buying the world time by controlling the epidemic. In fact, they made claims about how the fact that China had 99% of the world's coronavirus cases proved that they were helping the world. You have the most coronavirus, which means you're the best. Got it. Of course, as the coronavirus continued to spread around the world, the Communist Party couldn't claim that they had successfully contained it in China anymore. But the idea that their massive lockdown bought the rest of the world time, well, that took hold, like in this New York Times headline. And that's how the Communist Party has taken what should have been a devastating PR disaster and turned it into a propaganda win. I really gotta tip my hat to them. They're truly the best. And now that we're busy trying to drag ourselves out of the water, we've totally forgotten who threw us overboard in the first place. But there are still some pesky Western media that haven't forgotten. And they're blaming China, which is why the Communist Party's propaganda machine has created a new spin by tapping into a hot-button issue Western media organizations love to report on: racism. That's something I'll be talking about in our next episode. For now, be sure to share this episode so your friends and family know the truth. Don't let the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda win the day. Thanks for watching China Uncensored. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.